more Americans are now shifting to the left on different moral issues. Now, in a new poll from Gallup that is likely to make Bill O'Reilly's head explode, Americans are more likely to find being in gay marriages, having kids out of wedlock, and premarital sex more socially acceptable. Now, this poll from Gallup has a lot of different things basically in it that I'm going to go down the list of issues. They ask people to list a bunch of issues and whether or not they're morally acceptable or morally wrong. So I'm going to go down here. Now, you hear a lot of conservatives railing on birth control. You know, those who are in the very fringe far right. The social conservatives, the Rick Santorums, about birth control. 89% of Americans say that using birth control, is morally acceptable. 8% think morally wrong. Well, what about divorce, right? Divorce is one of those things biblically you're not supposed to have. 71% of Americans say, screw that. If you're with somebody that you don't like, divorce. They're okay with that. 20% say it's morally wrong. Premarital sex, 68% say morally acceptable. Gambling, this is an interesting one. Gambling, 67% say that it is morally acceptable. Medical research using stem cells, this is important for science and stuff. 64% of Americans say yes, absolutely, morally acceptable. Gay and lesbian relations, 63%. Having a baby outside of marriage, 61%, morally acceptable. Fur is an interesting thing. Buying and wearing clothing made of animal fur, that is 61%. Now, the death penalty, not exactly a left-leaning issue. A lot of these, except for the fur, are more or less liberal positions. We should be able to, personal freedom and such. Well, the death penalty, that's different, as 60% of Americans still think that this is the practice of the state executing somebody for a crime is morally acceptable. Now, I don't agree with that assessment. I think that we get it wrong more often than we get it right. And not only that, but just the whole idea of having the state have the power to kill somebody in order to try to deter people from from committing more crimes, which is proven not to work. It just doesn't make sense to me. But nonetheless, that's how the American people feel. 60% of them. Now there's others. Medical testing on animals, 56%, definitely not a liberal issue. Doctor-assisted suicide, 56%, morally acceptable. Abortion is evenly split, 45-45. Sex between teenagers, now we're getting to the very unacceptable range, where 37% say it's morally acceptable, 56% unacceptable. Cloning animals, 60% morally wrong. Porn. Oh, this is probably one of the most hypocritical things, because I can almost guarantee that most people polled looked at porn. But nonetheless, they say 34% say morally acceptable, but 62% are saying no. Oh, porn? No. Porn is morally unacceptable. We're not going to touch that, except late at night on a high-speed connection. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Polygamy, 16%, morally acceptable. And finally, 81% morally wrong for polygamy. And married men and women having an affair, only 8% morally acceptable. And 89% say that is morally wrong. So what about the changes of these over time? Because these have changed since 2001 and 2015. And it shows some of these. So I'm going to go back to gay and lesbian relations. This is interesting. Now, in 2001, 40% said morally acceptable. Now, 63%. It's a change of 23 points. So that really kind of shows the change that we as a culture have really embraced. Like, yeah, we're okay now with gay and lesbian sex, relationship, etc. Now, there's also been a 16% change in having a kid out of wedlock. That is, of course, in 2001, 45% of people said it's morally acceptable. Now, as I said, 61%. Sex between an unmarried man and a woman. It's really hilarious how that is an issue, but some people make it an issue. 2001, only 53% said morally acceptable. Now it's up to 68%, a 15% change. And there's a lot of different things. One of the things that really hasn't changed all that much is you've had buying and wearing clothing made of fur. Fur coats, that actually became 1% more morally acceptable than it was in 2001. So hardly any change in 14 years. Very, very interesting. And the death penalty has actually gotten less morally acceptable, going from 63% in 2001 now to 60% in 2015. So it's had a very, very marginal impact. So, I mean, there you go. Very, very interesting changes. Some to the left. A lot of these issues are to the left. It shows that we're a more progressive country socially on a lot of these social issues. On some, we haven't quite progressed very much, but once again, the hands of time will continue to keep on turning. Proud Mary, keep on burning. We're gonna keep rolling into the future, and we're gonna keep, I think, going towards a little bit towards the left.